Welcome into the Men Are Forged podcast. I'm your host, Cartwright Morris. Men Are Forged is about forging men through hard times. That is where we really find success, fulfillment, a higher quality of life is through the forging of life. So we're all about forging men into greater leaders and overall life development. So that's you. Go check out menareforged.com for more information, and I look forward to hearing from you. Today's guest is Hampton Dortch. Hampton is the host of the Wake Up and Lead Leadership podcast. He is with Wildsparq. He's a sales development leader. But overall, Hampton has such an energy for life. He's an excitement guy. He's a CrossFit guy. Most of all, he wants to see companies and organizations leave an impact, leave a legacy, and really lead their people well. So if you want to find out more about Hampton, I recommend checking out his LinkedIn profile. But here's today's interview with Hampton Dortch. All right, welcome into the Men Are Forged podcast. I got a great guest today. And those who have followed me know I get really excited about this, is I've got an Alabama guy on and a fellow podcaster, a local podcaster. You know, I'm so jacked up about this whole idea of collaboration and just knowing somebody's close, going through the struggle with me. And so anyway, his name is Hampton Dortch. Hampton, it's great to have you in, buddy.
And it is an honor to be here. And we're going to have to get some feedback from the audience on whose mic they like more.
Probably yours.
I don't know. I've got the one that's coming in from the side, so it looks kind of cool, but I don't know. Yours sounds pretty good, man.
The snowball, Yeah. So his podcast is Wake Up and Lead. For those, I love the way it looks on Spotify. Anyway, you should go check out his podcast. Give him a couple 5 stars, some ratings. As someone who is grinding away at the podcasting thing, I just want to commend you, Hampton. You're doing a great job. And so, my first question is really off of that. So what have you enjoyed most about this process of starting and growing a podcast?
Well, I feel like this is a common line that you may hear from a question like this, but I'm learning a ton. Like a lot of people, I feel like when they put themselves out there, the kind of excuses like, oh, I'm doing this for me. But I get that. And of course, I want to help other people. There's been some awesome opportunities through the company I work for, Wildsparq. Through the podcast, we've gotten some good connections there. But really, it's just given me a chance to meet some really incredible people. Some executive for some organizations, some coaches and consultants, and really even some mentors to where I know that I may look back in 5 years from now and say, my voice was kind of high back then and you sound like an idiot. But up to this point, I'm having a blast with it. So it has been fantastic. And the message is, when you make a podcast, for anyone thinking about doing this, some of the advice people say is don't make it too broad. I've probably done that because there's a lot of leadership podcasts out there. But I would say the message is similar to yours, Cartwright, to the younger folks that are just kind of drifting and waiting for something to happen to them. Wake up and lead. Like, your time is now. Let's go do it. But then also to the organizations that are just getting crushed by the Great Resignation right now and can't seem to figure it out and think that having a good culture means having a ping pong table. Like, to them, it's like, no, wake up. Like, there are ways to develop your people and empower them. And a good way I like to do that is through Wildsparq. So, anyways.
Yeah, man. So, your first line of your description of podcast really stood out to me because I resonate with this. To the person who is coasting early on in their career, just waiting for success to happen to them. That is an interesting, I would say I'm guilty of that as anybody, is you wait around and forget that you are the catalyst to your own story. That's kind of a lot of what I say is like, let's get that ball rolling. So for my audience here, and you did hit on, I do want to give a plug for Wildsparq, who you're working for, another brand here in Birmingham, leadership development. Really powerful, something more that I'm stepping into at Men Are Forged, but really cool what you're doing, Hampton. So as someone who's wants to be aspiring leader, how do they take that personal ownership How do they get their own, like, am I, and they had that question ring in them. Yeah.
You will never drift to your desired destination. That is not my quote. I've heard that from other people, but like, you just won't. And I am grateful to have some mentors, leaders in my life that have told me that early on. And I think we just get stuck in this cycle of maybe you crush it in high school. You're a great leader. You do SGA. You're a good athlete. You're the captain of the team. You go to college and you're a leadership on campus. And then you just get a job at a bank, which is nothing wrong with looking at a bank, but it's like, okay, well, here's at least the next 5 years until I could be a manager. So I'll just show up. And I think that's just what so many people do. It's an easy trap to fall into. But one message I have to the executive that has some of those leaders, please give them an opportunity to learn and grow. But now I'm going to put ownership on the 25-year-old to say, nobody's going to just give you all the resources, but there are tons and tons and tons out there. And even if you can't find a mentor around your area, which I feel like you probably could, you can learn in the digital age so much from other podcasts, from other books and everything like that. And so a big part about Wildsparq and a big part of what I'm passionate about is being ready. At Wildsparq, we say leaders ready. So yeah, we want to develop the current leaders and managers, but also the future ones as well. So for you who maybe you don't have a leadership title, you're a little bit younger, what if you started preparing now and said, hey, just because I don't have a title doesn't mean I'm not a leader. I'm going to learn first how to lead myself, because you can't lead yourself. You can't lead other people. And so that looks like your routines, your habits, your mindset, how you interact with your coworkers, maybe even leading up at work, which can be challenging, especially depending on your manager. But there's just all these opportunities. And what you'll see is in a few years when you become a manager, and I'm not even a manager yet, so I'm just maybe assuming this happens. This is what people told me. You will be ready, as opposed to you're not just going to get knighted by your boss with a sword and then all of a sudden become a great leader. You got to start preparing now.
Yeah. Yes. You made me think of the Bible verse, and now my brain is kind of fogging about it. Anyway, just we'll push through that. So yeah, Hampton. So give me a little bit more of your story of when did you first feel that mantle of leadership in your life?
My whole life. And I caveat this with, there are a lot of things that I really struggle with. And maybe we'll make another podcast where I tell you about all my problems. But for now, I will say that my whole life, people would say, well, Hampton, you're a natural born leader. And my mom would tell me things like, Hampton, you're a leader. People are going to follow you. It's your decision where you lead them. Are you leading for good? Or are you leading for bad or for yourself? And so from an early age, I was given some opportunities through sports and choir in school and church, youth group and all of that. And I think until I was 21 years old, I thought that being a good leader was 100% your level of charisma. So it was like, oh, if I can,
50-year-olds who do that still, right?
Right. And so, what we see in a lot of these churches that have blown up or companies is these people who have been gifted high levels of charisma. Their charisma is a 10 out of 10 and their character is a 5. And that might've been me in college. That was me in college. Yeah. Not that I'm a 10 out of 10 on charisma, but like I had no problem talking in front of a group of people. I had no problem getting fired up and casting a vision for my fraternity or whatever group it was. I had no problem with leading worship at church because I knew all the right answers, but what was deep down inside of me was actually all just for me. And so to briefly jump into some of my story, I realized halfway through college that I was just trying to build my own kingdom. And when some of that actually started to happen, when I started to get some of the things that I wanted, I wasn't very happy. Yeah. And I'm grateful to learn that now, because as I go through my life, even though my old self will come back up and that will be a challenge to make it all about me, I know where it leads to. And so all that to say, throughout my whole life, to go back to your question, I've been given lots of different leadership opportunities, but there was definitely a moment in college where I said, oh man, leadership is about other people, being others focused. And we have the best model of that through Jesus himself. And I can talk about that all day long, but Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. It's interesting. That point you made is like a constant. And, me and my wife like binging some of these shows, especially some of those based in true story. And I like that Hollywood's interesting. And anyone's listened to podcasts, I've said this before, but like these unicorns in these businesses, right? They blow up, but these people in their early 20s or mid 20s, and then by the late 30s, they've been kicked out of the business, and really their success outgrew their character, or they're like you're saying, their title was ahead of their character. So, I mean, it's interesting. You talked about, and I want to say your first episode, a little bit of your story. I mean, you can go check that out. I want to give another plug, Wake Up and Lead podcast.
Come on.
Yeah. But yeah, give us a little bit of just you stepping. All right, you had that realization kind of middle of college. All right, now how you reframed what a leader looks like and how a leader should act and focus on.
My mentor, Matt Letourneau, he's here in Birmingham. He's the CEO of Never Thirst, showed me, he pulled out a napkin at Starbucks the other morning. If someone pulls out a napkin, pay attention. So he pulls out a napkin and he starts writing, and he writes things like, being able to cast a vision, being charismatic, being strategic, hiring top talent, retaining talent, X, Y, and Z. And he wrote down 10 leadership qualities. He said, what are the most important ones to you? Or if you're following someone, like, what are the most important qualities for that person to have? And basically, there was a study that was done, and I can send you this if you want, but basically it said that 75% of people, what they wanted from a leader was someone that was others focused and inwardly sound. Others focused and inwardly sound. And so when I saw that, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But what we think is the guy or girl that can stand in front of a room and fire everybody up, or the one that gets all the top talent and everything. And all those things are great. But I think where we typically see other people fail is they're really focused on themselves. And so to the others focused piece, Matt told me, he said, Hampton, whether it's during your lifetime or not, people will eventually know if you're others focused or not. A lot of times it's even after you're dead and gone, but they realize you were living for yourself. So that will be exposed at some point. So I would just say, like, what I've learned is leadership is so much about making it about other people. I mean, some of the best leaders that I know, you wouldn't even know like what they do or their title or anything. They just listen and they care about you. And then the inwardly sound piece, I really can only speak to this from a spiritual standpoint, but it really comes from like, where is my identity? Is my identity in how much money I make, the person that I'm married to, where I live, the car I drive, or is it in Jesus, and is my heart available for him? And that then goes into your habits. So for me, it's like on the days that I'm inwardly sound, I'm likely getting up in the morning and spending time with God and reminding myself that my calling is doesn't have to be my job title. My calling is to make disciples of all nations. And however I live that out, whatever. But like, I think reminding myself of that, having the why, that's popular to talk about. But once you get that why in place, it helps me be more inwardly sound. And some of my friends, family, and wife might chuckle as I'm talking about this, because they're like, Hampton, I don't know if you're always inwardly sound, but I'm definitely doing my best.
Well, that's something we're always like, I love, I think I've seen you say Wild at Heart is your favorite book. And I love John Eldredge saying, like, we have to think with the unfinished mindset, that we're growing, building constantly. Like the arrival mindset was something in my life that really was just, destructive is too strong a word, but it led to that thinking, well, once I get here, right? Once I get this figure, once I get this title. And as a lot, what you said has started resonating with me is like, man, as a leader, if we are a leader to feed our ego versus we feel the humility of the weight of responsibility that God's given this, like I'm in this role only because God has given it to me. And there's a humility in that versus my ego, how that can really help. And inwardly sound, that is such a powerful way to look at it, because I think that is so true. If I define some of the great leaders in my life, It's like they're 2 feet wherever they are. I've been around the leaders where it's just like they're constantly looking past you. It's like they're on to the next thing. Versus those great leaders, they know how to take advantage of that moment. They know how to embrace the person in front of them and be 2 feet in. I love that phrase. Anyway, so inwardly focused. That's really powerful. Yeah, I mean, like you said, Jesus, like wherever he was, that's where he was, right?
Yeah.
He was fully engaged. So, yeah, man. So how did you, in that, you talked about your why, and we're all kind of on that journey of articulating exactly what that is. So for my audience, how do you unpack that? How do you start discovering that why so you could step into that role of leadership so that you are others focused and inwardly sound?
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Let's see if I can get a good answer here. I mean, I think we often say, God, if you give me this, maybe you don't say it, but you might be thinking, God, well, if you give me that job, or if you give me that house, or if you give me that girl, then I'll be good. And then I can live for you. I don't think that I would ever verbally say that, but that's my heart a lot of times. Right now I'm looking for a house. I've got an inspection today. Wish me luck. But I'm like, God, just let this come through. And I think really when it comes to finding your why, quote, it's your why is to be an image bearer of God. That's why he created you. And that's why you have breath in your lungs. And so when you can rest in that and know that, your purpose is to serve him, I think things fall into place. That's not the answer that people always want to hear. But I haven't found peace until I recognize that. And I think it goes back to that daily reminder, because we have ever wandering hearts, and we run away daily because our flesh is pulling us away. So just reminding that you are created by God. And then I think just deciding what am I passionate about? What gets me fired up? I mean, there's practical things, whether you're a believer or not, of writing out your personal mission statement for your life, your 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goals, some of the core values that you're going to have for you and your family, building some habits and structures into your life. I mean, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get your dream job, but I think things like that are what help you find that why. If
right.
You will.
Yeah. You have to live life to find that why. Absolutely. Yeah. You're not going to get it waiting around. What was the first quote you said about making,
you'll never drift to your desired destination.
Yes.
You will never drift.
The intentionality, that belief, I am the tip of the spear. I'm not just some blunt object walking around. So let's jump back in your story, Hampton. I'm really curious. So what was your decision process leaving college? 'Cause I know you jumped into Wildsparq. So help, for my listeners, especially you jumped in during COVID, I want to say. So what were the hard parts about that, and what did you learn through that process, and why you've stuck around with Wildsparq? Today's episode is brought to you by Thrive Marriage Lab. If you want your marriage to thrive, this is a great opportunity to you, because strong marriages are the bedrock of strong churches, organization, families, and community. This is a 12-month pathway for any of you that are looking to really have weekly engagement with experienced marriage counselors, not just one, but many. So go to restory.life/thrive to get on the waiting list for this great program that starts in April. That's restory.life/thrive. And make sure you put the word Forge in the promo code to receive a discount on your monthly fee. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah. So for the 20, 25, 30, 35-year-old listening to this, or whoever, someone challenged me they said, Hampton, go where you are going to grow the most. Where are you going to grow the most? It is an investment. So for me, I said my at least first 2 years out of college, if my CEO is listening to this, I don't want to work for free, but I'm like, I might as well work for free. I just want to learn.
Right.
And
great.
So praise the Lord for this. I was interning at Wildsparq at the time, and just learning a ton about building a business. We had 8 people and now we have 20. So we're growing fast. I'm seeing what a real good culture looks like. And like I said, that's that's not a ping pong table and espresso machines. That's a company that has a mission statement, a vision statement, and core values that everyone knows. A boss that knows your spouse and your children, things like that. So I saw that. And so basically it was a no-brainer. I said, I have to work here. Well, COVID happened. And so there's a whole nother story of there. It was a little iffy, if there was going to be like a spot opened up, but thankfully I ended up at Wildsparq, and it has paid off tremendously. And I think it will continue to, because I'm just learning. And so I think a lot of times we want the finished product. We say, well, I want, like, you look at what you want in 5 years. And so you just try to, I guess, do that now. For me, it's like, I know that all the things that I'm learning right now are preparing me for life and whatever is next, whether it's with Wildsparq for a super long time or something different. And so I just think we always need to be learning or doing, where am I going to grow the most? So Josh Etris, incredible leader. He was the first episode of my podcast. He used to work at Wildsparq, but he talks about how there is so much information out there on your phone and books and everything. And so we become what we consume. Yeah. We become what we consume. And so if you're on Netflix all the time and scrolling on your phone, that's not necessarily going to be helpful. So let's be mindful of, what are we consuming? What are we putting into our minds? How are we spending our time? And those things are definitely going to be what leads to you learning and growing. Whether, because maybe you're in a job right now and you're like, okay, that's great, Hampton. Your company does leadership development and your CEO prays before every meeting. I don't have that. If you don't have that, that's okay. I think there's still opportunities for you to find mentors and other growing opportunities.
Yeah, you hit on something that's really good, that I wish I had that mindset. And you're right, because I think sometimes we come out of college and the first thing we think is security. We think that in the context of money, health insurance. But you had that. I mean, it's like, if you don't know your overall why, maybe you got to start with like a smaller purpose, which for you it was, I just want to learn. And I think this is the best place for me to learn, because this is where I want to be. The thought of being a business leader, a business owner, whatever, and I will learn a lot here. And that's so powerful. And I wish I could like grab every 22-year-old and say, think this way. You got to learn how to like find the place where you can grow. And a paycheck, don't worry about it, because right now you don't need much. Right? So, but granted, you were getting married though too. So there's that little added pressure, right?
Yeah, I think my wife was like, "Hey, you better make some money."
Right. Yeah. So I'm curious, Hampton. Now you look back at your 4 years at college at Samford. For those who don't know, that's the Harvard of the South, apparently. So, not that I went there. My wife went there, so I'll say that. But what would you tell like an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old in college that's like, how to fully take advantage of their experience? Because I feel like there's something being amiss. It's all about grades and that making that next step and having life figured out by 25. So,
my goodness. I think sometimes people think now that you're like, oh, you must have been like doing X, Y, and Z in college. And I was very involved on campus and had a lot of good opportunities through my fraternity and, doing campus tours and things in campus ministry, but I also wasted a colossal amount of time. And I think there's an element of college, like it's fun. It's your first time out of the house. You make friends. Sure. Play Xbox with your friends, like do that stuff. But if I could go back, well, the first area that I would work harder on is in the classroom. I am working where I want to work. So I wouldn't work harder there to necessarily have a different job, but to defeat the fixed mindset that I once had and still struggle with. What I mean by that is there's an amazing book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and she talks about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Yeah. I only wanted to do things that I was really good at. And so I felt like in school, I was like, oh, well, if I don't try as hard as I can, I know I'm not as smart as my friends. So if I don't try as hard as I can, and I excel in other things, then I'll be able to make an excuse for why my grades aren't that good. Because if I try as hard as I can, then, and they're still not as good as everyone else, then I have no excuse. And that is a extremely toxic mind space, place to be in. Also, don't compare yourself to other people anyways. But so I would do that. But then also just there are so many, wherever you go to college, so many organizations, so many things to get involved with. And I learned so much about leadership and leading myself and managing my time and managing my schedule. And there's opportunities where, like, what's crazy is no one tells you, you know, you may be in a leadership role in your fraternity or campus ministry, but then you're going to graduate college and likely not have a leadership title for at least a couple of years, if not more. And so you kind of go from like on top of the world to low man. And so I think embrace those times and enjoy them. And let that be a catalyst for, hey, even when you get your first job, even though you don't have a title, think about those leadership principles you were learning and then continue to build on them, even if you don't have a title there.
Yeah, that's great. So Hampton, you're with the Leadership Development Organization. You have a leadership podcast. You interview some great leaders from different industries all over. And I know you're a consumer of books and content. Just follow Hampton on LinkedIn and he'll give you a lot of like just great little nuggets from stuff he's learning. So from what have you've consumed, what are some daily practices that leaders do that you've incorporated and that you really admire?
So another guest, see, this is why you should do a podcast, because I basically every answer is something that I've learned from doing my own. Teddy Mitroselis, he's number 2, the second episode that I have. He said that he has what he calls non-negotiables. Yeah. And every day he has a non-negotiable for his mind, body, and soul. And so he said that every day I'm going to do something active. I'm going to pray and I'm going to read a book. And he says that might be 2 minutes of stretching, a quick prayer, and reading a page of a book. But what he's mastered is the art of showing up. And so last night I was exhausted and I hadn't read a page of the book that I'm reading right now. And so I was like, you know what? I just got to read a page. And what that did is it didn't it's all about building habits and routines. And so I am like freakishly obsessed with habits. I think you've just got to figure out what are those non-negotiables for you. And you know, I'm a 5 a.m. guy. I know sometimes people say, oh, hustle culture, all this, that, and the other. Well, my challenge is typically, what are you doing from 10 to midnight? Are you watching Netflix? If you're doing that, you're not going to be able to get up at 5 a.m. Of course you're not. So I just think that if I can wake up in the morning and win the morning through spending time with my heavenly Father who created me, who gave me breath in my lungs, and then likely doing something active, it sets me up to win the day. So, I mean, those are definitely the 2 things that are non-negotiables. Yeah,
that's great. So, I mean, give me a leader that you admire, Hampton, somebody who may be current or historical or just even personal to you.
Okay, let's see. Yeah. I'll start with Miles Fidel. He's the pastor of my church, Auburn Community Church.
Yeah. Heard great things. Yeah.
Yes. He's the man. And there's a location here in Birmingham, but he started Auburn Community Church when he was 25. So basically my age. Wow. He definitely has a lot of things that he has learned, but this church is growing really quickly. But what I admire about him is he has an opportunity, if he wants to probably make this church absolutely explode. And he said, I'm not going to copy and paste what every other really big church in America has done. Nothing against any of those, but he goes like, I wasn't trying to start a location in Birmingham. You guys just forced it. You all started watching together, so we're not going to ignore you. I wasn't trying to start this in Huntsville. So his humility and knowing that like it's not all about numbers, and just his availability to really just preach the word of God. And he says something similar to another pastor I love from Redeemer here in Birmingham, Joel Brooks. Every prayer before his sermon, it's God, may my words fall to the ground and blow away, but would your words remain and would they change us? And so I think Miles does that really well too. So him, Corey Tao is the vice president of operations at Wildsparq. He came into our business a year ago and in that time, we probably were taking a few steps back, but I believe we're going to launch forward because of what he does. His ability to lead client success, marketing, product engineering, and sales, and go from meeting to meeting to meeting from different departments and hear everyone talk about their problems, but be where his feet are, blows my mind. And Corey is the definition of an integrator. You know, like he gets things done. If you say, hey, we need to do this, it's going to get done. And so he doesn't have to be the guy standing up in the front of the room casting vision all the time. He just, instead of casting vision, he just figures out what the vision is and then goes and does it. And then the last guy, because this guy is like my idol, Rich Froning, CrossFit GOAT. He has a gym in,
I was like, I knew that name.
I try not to talk about CrossFit a lot. People make fun of CrossFitters and say, how do you know if someone does CrossFit? And then the answer is, don't worry, they'll tell you. So here I am telling you I do CrossFit. Sorry. But that guy is, he's a monster. I love watching the way that he's led like his team. They just won the CrossFit games for like however many years in a row. And the man just grinds. So I want to look like him and I want to be like him too. So those are just a couple.
Yeah, I mean, the little study I've done of that, it sounds like he's hands above everybody else and what his ability.
Yeah, there's another guy, Matt Frazier, who's, as far as his accolades, he's way up there too. But I mean, Rich he's the guy. I mean, he's awesome. And he loves Jesus too.
Oh, how about that? That's great, man. All right. So Hampton, just give me, it's interesting is most great leaders I've been around is they're really good at defining success day to day. It's an evolving thing. So how do you define success regularly?
I may need to ask you this question in return because I'm kind of trying to work on that. I think something I really want to grow in is time blocking my day and like prioritization and saying, hey, what are the 3 most important things that I need to get done today? I am there's this matrix called the Eisenhower matrix. Dude, I'm a sucker for the bottom left, which are things that are urgent and not important, like a text message, of just something that's meaningless. The reason is because I love checking off like little tasks. It's like a dopamine hit, but a lot of times I am avoiding the big thing, the big priority, because I'm scared to get started. And Rich didn't come up with this, but Rich Froning has a brand called Into the Storm. He owns bison, and he talks about how there's this analogy of the bison and the cow. And when there's a storm coming out in this place in Colorado, the cows run away and they maximize their time that they're in the storm because they're avoiding whatever for us, avoiding the big thing. And it just makes it worse. The bison or the bulls or whatever they are, they turn and run into the storm and run through it. And maybe they're in it for a minute, but they're out of it a lot quicker. And so I'm not doing that right now, but I know the right answer. And I'm trying to say, what's the big thing I got to work on? And let me just knock it out.
Right. And I've come to find out in my list of failures that generally God, he allows the storm, and what he's doing, he's putting his finger on something and he's saying, I'll once we figure this out, once you turn and look at that storm, well, we'll get through a lot quicker. So
yeah, you're right.
It's good. Well, Hampton, I appreciate you coming on, man. I would love for you just give a plug for more, where people can find you and, how they can really consume more of your content.
Well, I'm one of the rare people that's like, I'm not really on social media except for LinkedIn. Usually it's the opposite for people. I'm all over LinkedIn. I post like a 5th grade girl. If you don't want to see that, don't follow me, but I'm sharing just what I'm learning along the way. One of my favorite things to do is on Fridays, I post a fail Friday because I fail more than I succeed. So follow me there, shoot me a message. And then with Wildsparq, if you're in any sort of position of thinking for a group of people in your organization, we have built a system or strategy to help develop not only current but future leaders as well. And also a great resource to learn about learning and growing as a leader is this podcast. Cartwright's the man. We just met today, but excited to learn more from him.
Well, Hampton, I appreciate it, man. It was great having you. Love your energy. Super excited for where your podcast is going. Because I know you're in the early days, but man, you are rocking it. So I'm really excited about it. So
we'll see if I can make it through episode 10. Apparently everyone falls off the wagon there. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you got it. I think you're heading in the right direction.
We'll see. Thanks for having me, Cartwright.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Mentor Forge podcast. If this is your first time listening and you really enjoyed this interview, I recommend going and checking out episode 93 with Croft Edwards. It's how your leadership style can expand involved. Much like Hampton, excited about how to lead others, how to grow others in your culture and in your environment. And similarly, Croft works with other executives and leaders in business and the military and really helps unpack that as well. And really, especially if you've got a real niche in wanting to grow in your leadership abilities. So I recommend episode 93. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time.